everybody. Welcome into Perspectives. I'm Sam Jones. It's good to have you here. The first guest you're going to meet today has got her hands full. I don't know how she's going to do it. She's with the City of Tulsa. Emily Hall, Senior Advisor on Homelessness. Now, we've talked about this before, but not to the extent that this lady is involved. First of all, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here. Our new mayor wants to eradicate homelessness in Tulsa. Can he pull this off?
It is a lofty goal, but we believe it's a doable goal. And the goal is to reach functional zero by 2030, which means homelessness in Tulsa is rare, brief, and non-recurring. We know that there's always going to be homeless individuals, but we want to have the infrastructure in place, the foundation in place, that when people get to that point, that it is rare, there's supports available to them, and that can bring them back into stable housing.
You're dealing with a lot of mental illness, a lot of drug addiction, a lot of bad attitudes. How in the world are you going to get their attention?
You know, the issue of homelessness is very complex. And we have incredible service providers in Tulsa that are working in these specific areas. We have great mental health support, great mental health crisis management support, drug and alcohol support, but also there are many, many folks that are not visible to the general public, who might have lost a job, whose pay can't keep up with rent, and they are now living in a car. They no longer have stable housing, and those sorts of circumstances are on the rise.
That brings to mind another thing I just read, that because of the fluidity of movements in Washington, food supplies are going to become more and more scarce unless some changes are made, which is going to fall down on your group trying to work with the homeless.
Sure. Right now, we haven't had any experience facing that hurdle yet. We have some great organizations like the Food Bank, Iron Gate, who work hand in hand in providing resources and warm meals to not just our unsheltered, but many other individuals and families across the community.
I think I read that it may have been in the morning paper that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that at any given time there's about 1,300 plus homeless people on the streets of Tulsa.
That is correct. Any given night, they're between 1,300 and 1,400 individuals are spending the night on the street.
And the goal is to move them into some sort of place to live, to call home?
Yes, to have permanent housing. And so that's going to take some time to make sure that the infrastructure is in place. We need more housing. We need more affordable housing.
I just was about to ask you that. Do you have the housing to take care of them?
We have some of the housing, but not all of the housing. So my counterpart, Senior Advisor on Housing, we're working hand in hand of how do we build that infrastructure. Another one of the mayor's goals is over the next 6 years to have 6,000 new affordable units online. And that's going to take a lot of work as well. But in order for us to ensure that people remain in their house, remain in permanent, safe housing, we've got to have the infrastructure.
It would seem like there's got to be some kind of and I'm sure you have professionals lined up to deal with this, but somehow to take these folk and say, look, we have to instill in these individuals the need or the want or the yearning to be in a housing area somewhere, to be employed if possible?
Yes. So the wraparound supports, the social service supports are there, and many folks are receiving those right now as they're living on the street. And the majority of the homeless that are in Tulsa, 73%, were Tulsans before coming homeless. And so these are members of our community who are at their most vulnerable state right now. And so the city is working in partnership with Away Home for Tulsa, which is the continuum of care, and partner organizations that make up that group to ensure that the right supports and resources are available to people.
Now, the mayor's deadline, that's the wrong word, but his target date is what?
2030. The goal is 2030.
So we have a little time.
We do, but the problem that we have right now didn't happen overnight, and it's not going to be fixed overnight. So it's going to take time. The mayor this week just issued an executive order making homeless a priority for the city of Tulsa. And it lays out some of the areas of work that we're going to be focusing on to get to functional zero.
Is it safe for me to assume that the mayor is going to be in contact with other cities across the country to see how they're dealing with the problem? Because every city in this country has an issue with homelessness.
Yes, definitely. He's learning from other cities. He's a member of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and so great resources. We want to be a leader in this work, and so we're taking best practices from cities that have already started, and how do we compile what they're doing really well and make it centralized to Tulsa?
Well, at some point, I'd like to get maybe a progress report from you.
Absolutely.
Maybe a half year or so down the road. Or would you come back and
Absolutely.
just bring us up to speed and say, we were here, but we're here now?
Yes, would be glad to.
We'll look forward to that. Thank you for
Thank
taking
you.
time. And break a leg, kid. Go get them.
I appreciate it.
I hope it all works out for you. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back with more right after this. We're back, and you may not be aware of it, especially if you're new to Oklahoma. But did you know that Oklahoma has her own submarine? Well, we do, and it's the Batfish. And let me tell you what she did back during the war. World War II, the Batfish sank 3 enemy subs, 11 other enemy vessels. As a result of their record, the Batfish and her crew, highly decorated, 9 battle stars, 1 Navy Cross, 4 Silver Stars, 10 Bronze Stars, and a Presidential Unit Citation. Well, as it turns out, we are going to be talking more about the Batfish because, well, how did we get her and where we go from here is next on the agenda. And James Gulley is he is the War Memorial Park Authority Chairman in Muskogee, and he's here now to talk about the Batfish. First of all, welcome. It's good to have you here.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
How did we get the Batfish?
How did we get the Batfish? Well, when we built the waterway all the way from New Orleans up the Mississippi across the Arkansas River, there was some submariners who realized that there was some submarines the Navy is going to decommission in New Orleans. So they got permission to go from the U.S. Navy, and they found the USS Batfish 310. So the Navy agreed that we could have it. So with the new waterway, they pulled it up by our tugboat all the way up to Muskogee. They built a canal from the Arkansas about 100 yards, brought it in. They dug out a pit for that. Then the Corps helped flood it. So then they pulled it on with a couple of tractors. And then once they did that, they sealed off the canal, pumped the water out, and they moored the boat into this pit. So that's how we got it from the U.S. Navy.
No easy task.
No easy task.
And there's a lot of upkeep.
There's a lot of upkeep to it because it's just an older Batfish and things are deteriorating or rust and just the wear and tear of the weather and that sort of stuff.
You know, my wife and I toured the Batfish some years ago.
Very good.
And it was quite an experience to be on board. And I maintained with her, I said, you know, there are ghosts walking this vessel. And if you get quiet enough, you can probably hear them. And you can hear the sounds of combat because she did see a lot of action.
Yes, she did. She did 7 tours, and on their 6th outing, most of the Japanese fleet had already been pretty much destroyed, so they were looking for submarines, and they found 3 submarines within 76 hours and sunk 3 of them.
No kidding.
And that's a record for the U.S. Navy.
And the Batfish holds the record.
And the Batfish has the record. We think there was
Toledo.
another one that they sunk, a German one, but they don't have any proof of that one. But
All right,
they
now
know.
there are plans in the works
Yes.
for the Batfish. You're going to move her again.
We're going to have to move her again. When we had the 2019 500-year flood, the Batfish, the water came over the bank, and we floated the Batfish up, and it started floating downriver.
Oh, great.
And so, because it was in a pit, was on a mound on the side of our property, but now she's sitting on the ledge of the property, and she's tilting 5 degrees. Well, the Port Muskogee has done an excellent job of getting funding to build a berm around their industrial park, which includes the city water plant, Muskogee City Water Plant. So now once we've done that, then we have no way of getting the people to the boat and that sort of stuff, because you can't get on it because of the lean to it. So we're going to lift her up, and we're going to put her on a trailer, and we're going to take her and then put her on a barge to get her about 2 miles south and take it to Port Muscogee's Three Forks Harbor.
She'll be safe from there on out.
She'll be safe from there on out.
What are the hours on it right now? Well, I guess you are open right now.
Well, what people need to remember that we also have a War Memorial Museum, and we have artifacts that go before the Civil War, all the way up through the recent conflicts that we've had. So people forget we're the War Memorial Museum featuring the USS Batfish.
So, we got a lot of stuff, but we also got a sub out back.
Yes, and everybody gets excited. It's amazing when we start visiting and as we start this process of getting the funds to move the boat, how many people have memories like yourself that have been on the boat. It really doesn't do, you can read it on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, but when you actually go inside that boat and see what these 60 men and plus their officers, what the conditions they lived in for 75 days. I mean, I can't imagine sharing my bed with another sailor, but that's how they worked. You
rotated in shifts.
Rotated in the shifts, so.
Good Lord, and they were just boys.
Well, they were boys, but they were really specialists. They just didn't pick anybody off the street to be submariners.
No, they were specialists.
They were specialists, yes.
Hard times on everybody, both in combat and folks back home.
Oh.
What comes next? I think we have some artist renderings, don't we?
Yeah, you should have some artist renderings. What we're doing now is we're doing a public relations campaign to start raising funds. And really what we need the citizens of Oklahoma to do is to reach out to their state and federal legislatures to tell them how important the Batfish is to our history and for Oklahoma being a destination. Before the 2019 flood, we were probably having 50,000 visitors a year, and now we're down to less than 5. And we anticipate when we move it back down, the visibility and the access will be even better. And so we anticipate that we'll have more than 50,000 visitors.
Easily.
Easily, yes, sir.
So it'll generate a lot of revenue too.
It'll generate a lot of revenue, but also we give a lot of history, and we really pay honor to our veterans. The people who served in the armed forces, the men and women, I'm blessed that I have my grandchildren I get to see on a regular basis, but when you're in the military, you can not see your family for months and weeks and years at a time.
Yeah, really.
They really make a big sacrifice for us, and we need to make sure that we hold on to these kind of monuments to dedicate to those veterans at the
Has
end of the
anybody
day.
written a history of the Batfish?
There are some histories on it, yes.
Where could I find a copy?
If you come to the museum, we have a brochure that gives an account for all 7 tours that they did. Who were the captain and the boat, and what they saw and what they didn't see. They even rescued some air pilots when they were down in the Pacific too.
No joke.
No joke.
First to fight above the water, then they're on board to fight below the water.
Right. Yep.
Good Lord.
It was close quarters, smelly and all that. If the smells are still there.
I'll bet.
And you mentioned that there's ghosts on it. Well, before the floods, we were having almost every weekend we're booked with sleepovers with the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and other civic organizations. And Halloween is really spooky when
Oh,
you spend
really?
the night on the Batfish, yes.
How so?
Well, it's like you say, all of a sudden now the lights go down and it's dark, and the next thing that boat is, it kind of changes the temperatures from hot to cold and starts getting all those creeks in it. I'm sure there's some storytellers in those troop
I'll bet there
leaders.
were a lot of kids that, on those nights especially,
Yes,
that had
absolutely.
stories to tell later.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, thanks for coming by.
Oh, you bet. Thank you for having us, quite frankly.
Give us a promise that you'll come back when you've got everything in place.
We are excited about that. We want to be able to video it once we decide to get everything in place to start lifting that boat up and putting it on a truck and shipping it down. We'd love to have some people take some video of that.
I'd love to do it. I'd love to be a part of it.
We-
Just give us a call and we'll head that way.
Trust me, we have your number.
You're a good man. I don't care what anybody says.
Be careful about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back after this. Keith Myers is here with us today. He's brought along some items from his traveling military museum. Keith, welcome.
Well, thank you.
It's good to have you here, buddy.
Well, I'm pleased to be here, and thank you for having me come.
First of all, some of the things we've got that are surrounding us here, I'd be a little curious to know how you got your hands on them.
Well, in 1984, the City of Tulsa, with some generous sponsors, decided that they were going to have the second largest observance of the 40th anniversary of Normandy D-Day. And by the way, they did have the second largest. And people saw my displays, and then they would come up and say, well, I got Dad's things, or I got my brother's things. And that's how I accumulated. And most of the articles I have are actually identified to the veteran, and that's my primary reason for the displays.
Are you looking for a permanent home?
Yes, I am. I very much am, because most of the articles I have are identified to the actual veterans, and they are my responsibility to take care of.
Well, it goes without saying that veterans never get their due. I mean, people see them and recognize them as vets, but doggone it, they just don't realize what that man or that woman has gone through to become a veteran, what they did for the country.
Right.
Being gone 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years at a time, or being a POW. It just doesn't register. So I think what you're trying to do here, what you're putting together, is critical. It's very, very important. Let's talk about some of the things that are behind us now.
Okay.
And I don't know, Brian, what you want to show first, but we could start with the Japanese flag?
The Battle of Iwo Jima, of course, the Americans won at a very high cost of life. But after it was over, the Marines are great souvenir takers. And a group of the Marines took that flag as a souvenir. Mm-hmm. And it was the 27th Regiment Marines that took that. And in the middle of the flag, in the meatball, as they called it, some Marine has drawn the drawing of the flag raising that occurred at Iwo Jima.
You
And
have to get in real close to see it, though, and there are names all around the red meatball.
Right. Yeah, there are 79 names, and I have researched every name, and I have a very large binder with histories of each and every one of those individuals.
So you know who's alive and who's not.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they are all deceased. I talked to the last one, it was 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. He was 98.
You were scheduled to bring your display to the Circle Cinema.
Right.
And the cold snap and the snow hit, everything got canceled.
Right.
So that was going to be a big display that you didn't get to show.
Well, we actually, in the Circle Cinema being a very patriotic
They are.
organization, we then had it moved to March the 5th. And so I did get to show the display.
This is an intriguing display. What is that?
Okay, that is the scoreboard for the Navy ship destroyer Hazelwood. And the USS Hazelwood was involved in the Battle of Okinawa, and they were hit by 2 kamikazes, airplanes. The bridge was totally destroyed. 77 men were killed, and the ship was dead in the water. And then later they got it moving, and they moved back to Mare Island, California. Well, where their scoreboard had been destroyed because it was on the side of the bridge, one of the sailors had recreated it because they wanted to show the colors, what they had done to the enemy. Well, one gentleman got the piece of canvas, rolled it up, took it home, put it in the attic of his house. He was a gentleman from Tulsa, and he saw one of my displays, and he told me about it, and he presented it to me.
We have other items that you brought along, and I'm not sure, Brian, where you want to go first, but you pick it, and he's ready to talk about it. What do you see now? What are we looking at now?
Okay, that is an Eisenhower jacket that was worn by my uncle, who was in the Airborne, 82nd Airborne. He jumped into St. Mary-Glise, was wounded, and then later, after he got out of the hospital, he was reassigned to another airborne unit and was at the Battle of the Bulge.
And came home.
And came home, yes.
Pretty amazing. I got to ask you a question. Your family and mine share veterans
Right.
from World War II. They're a little different than other folks, aren't they?
Yes. They have I hate to use the word club, but they have their own group.
It's a bond.
Bond, yes. And one thing I mentioned when Tom Brokaw came here to do read the book, tell about the book that he'd written,
Greatest Generation.
Greatest Generation. I personally think that's when the lock was opened and told the veterans, it's okay, we want to hear about you.
You think his book was responsible?
I do, really do.
Well, he looked over your collection, didn't he, while he was here?
Yes, yes. He even shook my hand, and one day I'm going to wash it.
This is a bomber jacket. Tell me about it.
Okay, this one was worn by a gentleman who was in the European theater and with the B-24 bomber, and they have what looks like little fish on the back. Well, their symbols are representative of bombs that were dropped against the enemy, and the bomb in the middle, there's a B, which indicates that group bombed Berlin.
So they were involved in some pretty heavy bombing.
Yes.
Well, so many of those missions, the young men that wore those jackets never came home. What about some of the uniforms that are behind us?
Okay, over there in the corner, over that way, is a uniform that was worn by a Tulsan. He was a survivor of Pearl Harbor, and he was with the 1st Division, Marine Division, and later he was at the Battle of Okinawa. And when he came home, he joined the 1st Oklahoma Highway Patrol class after the war. And he, like a lot of the buddies I met, were phenomenal people. They never bragged about what they did. They just did their job and came home. I do these programs primarily for schools, retirement centers, civic organizations, and I'm the best price in town. I'm free.
And now it's time to find it all a home.
Yes, it's time to find a home.
Thank you, my friend.
Okay, thank you.
Keep us posted.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we're all out of time. We're going to have to kick it down the road a little bit. We'll see you back here next time.